Hello everyone, this is going to be an introduction to the second week of the class, or the second module. And what I'm going to do is try to introduce you to the idea that philosophy is based around problems. So we're going to look at problems in philosophy, and what these do is these set up what philosophy then attempts to do and when it does its work. So what we're going to do is look at two of the problems that are in philosophy: what is real and what is mind. And what is real is what we're going to talk about when we're doing the second module. And then what is mind is the main question, philosophical question, we'll look at in the third module. So to begin, let's see. The first thing we want to do is get an overview here of what we're going to do. So what I'm going to talk about first is understanding what problems in philosophy are and how we understand what they are. Philosophy is all about questions, so we'll set up the problems that these questions end up raising. Then we'll look at the problem of realism. This is the basic fundamental metaphysics problem that's out there, is idealism versus realism. So I'll explain that as a problem. You're going to work with this in the discussion for the second module. Then we will look at the theories of mind problem, where this arises from. And this is kind of an introduction to where we're going to be going for the third module. And then I'm going to introduce the idea of what the paper covers, just so you can start thinking about it. It's not due until the fourth week, the fourth module. So you've got a little time, but I want to get it in your mind. And then I'll go over where you should be at this point in the class, just so you make sure you're ready to go. So to begin, what I want you to do here is look at this video. These are about optical illusions, and they're not your typical optical illusions or 3D optical illusions. So in your browser, go switch over to this YouTube video, watch that, and we'll come back and we'll discuss it. So I'll give you a few minutes, just pause this video and jump over to that one. All right, so now you should be back. You should have looked at this. And what I did was this is to show that when we look at optical illusions, the problem comes up that we think we see one thing, but it's really something else. And this is kind of what we encounter a lot of times in our lives. We think we see one thing, but it's really something else. If we're walking through the mall, we suddenly think we hear somebody say our name, we turn and look and nobody's there. So we get these ideas that things are the way we perceive them, but that doesn't always turn out to be accurate. So what this ends up doing in philosophers then go, well, wait a minute, if it's happening on an everyday scale like this, maybe we ought to rethink what it is we thought we knew or assumed to be true, and then we can maybe consider what really is the case. And that's what happens is philosophers start looking at these things and they say, well, this is the common sense view, this is what I accepted every day, but if I think about it, there's cases where it doesn't quite fit. And so this happens in different areas of philosophy. And one of these is that we assume what's real. We assume that the objects out in front of us are real things that are out there. And so then we start thinking about it, and sometimes we go, we thought it was this way, but it's really not. Which one is it? This is the main problem of metaphysics. So we do that. At other times we think we claim we can know something. We know statement X is true, but it turns out that later on we find out, well, no, we don't have any good reason for thinking that statement is true. So we start questioning what we thought we knew. And this is problems of epistemology. It deals with those questions of things we know. And the one that happens that we encounter most often is what is right. And what's the right thing to do? And initially we may think one thing's the right thing to do. We stop and think about, well, maybe that's not quite the right thing to do. And that leads philosophers into the area of ethics, where we question and try to figure out what it is to make a claim that an action is the morally correct thing to do. So those are the main areas of philosophy that arise, and the problems arise in these different areas in these broad questions. And so we're going to look at a couple of those. So if we turn to metaphysics and the question of realism, this is the most fundamental problem in metaphysics that's out there. And so what I want you to do here, I got another video for you to watch. Watch this one. It's a time-lapse photography of trees over the course of a year. So just watch that, and when you're done, come back and look at it. So you've had a chance to look at it, and this is the question I have for you. Which ones of those are the trees? Are the trees the ones with no leaves that they started with? Or are trees those things with leaves, or that are green? Or are they the objects that have the colored leaves on them? Which one is the real tree? I mean, they change constantly and continuously throughout this time. So we can start to ask this question. As they change, are these really the same tree throughout the video? It's changing constantly and it never looks the same, but we assume it's the same tree. We call it the same tree. It's there in that location all the time, but it definitely doesn't look like the same. It's always constantly changing. It's growing and the leaves are changing color and so on. So we can then further ask it, well, was it a tree when it was a seed? Just like in the case of caterpillar. Is the caterpillar the same thing when it becomes a butterfly? Which one of those is real? Is it the caterpillar? Is it the butterfly? Is it the seed? Is it the tree? We don't know, because we think it's one thing, but if we stop and think about it, well, it changes over time. So which is the real thing? The seed before it becomes a tree? The tree when it becomes a tree? Is it the tree with the leaves, the tree without the leaves? When we're looking at caterpillars and butterflies, is the caterpillar real or is it the butterfly? They seem to be the same object, but they're definitely different objects. So how do we know which one's real? And this was Plato's problem. And this is one of the basic initial philosophy problems, is we can look around the world and everything we think is real changes. So if it's real, how can it change? If I want to know what a chair is, every single chair that I can experience looks different. They're in different places, different times, they're shaped different. They all have the same basic function, but they're all different. But I know they're all chairs. So how do I know this? What is it that lets me know that's really what a chair is? What is real? And if they change constantly, Plato said that can't be what's real. There has to be something that's permanent in order to be real. And that permanent thing is what lets us understand what all these objects in the world really are. So that becomes the problem of realism, trying to identify what is really real. Is it the objects that are in front of us? Even though they're all different, but they may be of the same type. I can put up 10 chairs in front of you. Are those chairs real? Or is the idea that what a chair is what real? And it's because we have that idea that we can then say all of these are examples of chairs. That's the dilemma between realism and idealism. Which one's real? The objects or the idea of what those objects are? And that becomes a problem. And how do we justify when we say something is real or not? Now, that's the overarching metaphysical problem. It's the debate between idealism and realism. And now within metaphysics, there's a whole bunch of problems. And the specific one we're going to shift to in another week is going to be the theory of minds. And if we think about this, this is the problem. If you're sitting there, you're listening to me, you're thinking about what I'm saying, your thoughts, you have emotions that are going on, and they seem to be distinct from your body. My physical body is not my thoughts. My thoughts are not my body. They're two different things. They seem that way. There's definitely a connection to them. How we understand that is another question, but there seems to be definitely a distinction between what one's thoughts are and what their body is. So this would seem that there's two different things in us. There's a mind and a body. It's our thoughts, our emotions are our mind, and then there's a physical body that goes with them. This is the idea of dualism. Very few people question this for a long time. This was Plato's view. This was Descartes' view, which you're going to read. So that's the thing. However, when philosophers stop and think about this, the question is, if there's a mental thing there, this mind that is our thoughts and emotions, if we go looking for it, we can't find anything. The only thing we find are more physical body parts. Yeah, we think our thoughts and our emotions are in our head. So let's crack open somebody's head and see if we can find anything in there. We've done this. There's nothing there. It's just a brain. It's just electrochemical processes in the brain. If there's nothing there, then that's the claim of materialism. It's only the physical body that exists. It somehow produces these mental events that we experience, but they're not real. The only thing that's real is the physical body. And this is the idea of materialism, which is in contrast to dualism, which says there's two things. Materialism says the mental thing doesn't really exist. Because if it did, we could find it, but we can't find it, so we got to eliminate that mental part, that mind thing, as something distinct from the body. And what we're going to do is look at a couple of different theories here. One is behaviorism, and what this claims, and it's philosophical behaviorism, that the way to understand what we mean by mind is just the behaviors we associate with those mental acts. So when a person is thinking, they act in a certain way. That's what behaviorism says the mind is. So we'll go into these in a little more detail later on, but just so you get an overview. One of the main ones out there right now is called mind-brain identity theory. And this is the mind and the brain are the same thing. There's no difference. They're just a physical brain. But what we experience in our mental lives, in our introspective lives, is described in one way, but we can describe it from a physical way, but what we're describing is the exact same thing. So I can describe the color green in terms of that color of being alive, fresh, that type of thing. But I can also describe it in terms of the wavelength, whatever the wavelength of light it is. Okay, so now I'm describing it as an emotional characteristic, that alive, green, rebirth, that type of thing. But I can also describe it as a physical component in terms of the physical wavelengths of it. What mind-brain identity theory says is that's what we're doing when we're talking about the mind and the brain. They're the exact same thing. We have a brain that's in there, but we can describe what goes on there in terms of the electrical chemical processes that neurons are firing, but we can then also describe the same exact event from our internal perspective, that it feels like it's an emotion, that we're happy. But they're the exact same thing. There is no difference. There's no mental thing separate from the physical one. So that's the other one. And then a more contemporary theory is called functionalism. And what this says is, yeah, we're getting rid of all this mental talk in terms of some mind out there. And what we really need to do is just understand what the mind is in terms of what its function is. What does it do for us? And if we can articulate that, then we know what the mind is. And for the functionalists, the mind is what allows us to take in information, process it, figure out how to respond to our external environment, and then do that action. And anything then that has that ability is what is a mind. It doesn't matter if it's a physical brain or some other alien brain, it's still got a mind. Okay? There's no mental thing, there's no soul, there's no mind like that, because all of these three theories deny that. But for functionalism, it's just we understand the mind in terms of the role it plays. So that just gives you a little overview of where we're heading here eventually. Okay. What I do want to talk about is the first paper, just to implant these ideas into your mind a little bit. So the overall question we're going to ask is, what would one say about AI and whether it has a mind? Okay. And to do this, what you're going to do is take one of those four theories: dualism, behaviorism, mind-brain identity theory, or functionalism, and apply that to if there was artificial intelligence that was fully created, would we say it's a mind? Okay. So what you're going to do is explain and defend your view of those four positions on what the mind is. Again, you'll explain what dualism is, behaviorism, mind-brain identity theory, or functional is just one of them, and then defend it. You'll give an argument, and I'll go through those in a future lesson. Okay, so you'll present that. That's presenting the philosophy part. Then you're going to take this and say whether that theory would say AI is a type of mind, if it has a mind or not. Okay, so that's what you want to do. So and then present an implication of your position. What does it mean? This is just another way of doing it. So you present your position. If AI has a mind, if functionalism would say AI has a mind, what does that mean? Okay, what does it mean to say that it has a mind? So some computer program, basically an advanced computer program has it. And finally, what you're going to do is, just so you know, this is about 750 to 1,000 words. So it's approximately 3 pages long, double spaced. Just so you know that. If you're doing much shorter than that, like you got a page and a half, you probably haven't covered everything. If you're going into 5-6 pages, you're probably covering too much. But I just give that as a guideline so you know what you're going to do. So where should you be at this point? If you're reading this, you should have finished the welcome and module 1, so you should have got those first sections out of the way. You have your discussion post done. Everything should be good for that one. And make sure you do your replies for that first discussion. And now you should be starting to work your way through idealism or realism. This is the material that's in the module 2, so we want to look at that. Start working on this. And what you want to do is understand what the problem is and how both sides address it. Okay, so what you're going to do is explain what the problem of idealism versus realism is. Okay, this is not, and I have to repeat this, this is not a claim about how we approach the world. It is not saying that I'm a realist and I'm on a practical point of view and I got to take what comes to me. That's not what realism means in this context. Idealism is not I have a optimistic point of view of the world. That is not what idealism is. Idealism and realism make a claim about what objects in the world are real. Make sure you get that right. So I'll harp on that throughout the discussion. And then what you're going to do is, the discussion is practice presenting an argument on this. So think of this as a practice doing an argument in philosophy. And that's what you're doing. Okay, you're learning how to make philosophical arguments. So you want to keep that in mind as you're doing the discussion. And then this week, also start thinking about what AI is so that you can get some thoughts in the paper. Just general thoughts, nothing specific at this point. If you have some ideas, you can write them down and keep track of them, but it'll help you just getting to start thinking about this paper. And when I mean AI, I mean like a full robot that can function and act on its own. So it's not just like Siri or something like that. We're talking way beyond that. All right, so if you do have questions, just drop me a note. Let me know. We can set up time to talk, or I can email you back, however's best for you. And that's how. So get started on the next module.